Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Ed Wood Summit podcast. I often mistakenly refer to it when I look back at these sometimes as the Ed Wood podcast summit, which doesn't quite make a lot of sense, but a lot of things don't make sense. So I want to welcome you back. I'm Greg Javer. We're here obviously going to talk about something related to Ed Wood, something we've been doing quite frequently lately, which is taking a closer look at texts that for one reason or another may have suggested to me that Ed Wood may have had a hand in that. It seems unlikely that his work would just be floating around out there absolutely everywhere, but let's find out. I've got W Paul Apel joining me here tonight. You have to have, if you're playing the Paul Apel drinking game at home tonight, there's two right there, so you got to be careful. 1, 2. You may remember this gentleman. I know I'm not going to call him by name anymore. You may remember this gentleman from a podcast we did way back in. It's hard to fathom now, sir, that this was 6 whole months ago.
Yeah, was it back in May or something?
It was back in, I think it was April. We talked about the Ed Wood's Frank Leahy script, the Frank Leahy legend. And I think we still have more to say on that subject, actually, at some point in the future. But today we're going to talk about an Ed Wood text. So last week, Joe Blevins joined me, and he did a really, I got to say, an absolutely brilliant job diving into the text of a paperback titled Sex Salvation, which we are entirely confident is actually the Gone Missing Saving Grace, Ed Wood's paperback Saving Grace. So check that podcast out. While you're at it and you're surfing elsewhere, check out XXX Books, TRIPLEX books.com. Over 18,000 digital scans there of adult paperbacks, mostly from the golden era, the 60s and 70s, for just a couple bucks a piece. Often have sales and discounted lots and things like that. He's got the gentleman who runs the site also has over 5,000 physical copies available at good prices. I bought a handful. I don't buy a lot. I can't afford to go buying a whole hell of a lot of physical paperbacks. So it's been a boon to me to be able to get scans at a price like that at XXX Books. So, and when you do go, please drop it in the order notes. A few people who have watched the podcast previously, and I really appreciate it more than you know. It allowed me to actually find Sex Salvation, if you want to know the truth, because I was able to get, through the sponsorship deal, a number of higher volume of paperback scans that I would have probably purchased, that I would have been able to afford to purchase. Quite frankly, I buy more and more as time wears on. I buy more and more Admiral Morabilia, and it gets a little bit pricey. So thanks to them. Thanks again, Paul, for coming here. This is the last time you have to play the game unless you want to play along at home. We're going to actually get into a very, what kind of discussion? I'm not sure if it's going to be a divisive discussion. I have an inkling that maybe we actually might not entirely be in agreement on this one from a quick exchange we had a little while back. So going back, I'm going on and on at great length. As always, about a month ago, I'm scanning through a magazine. It's the end of the night. I was really, really tired. In fact, I thought I should have gone to bed. And it was a film magazine, one of the pictures from exploitation films, obscure exploitation films with wraparound texts and things like that, fairly commonplace type of thing. I've looked through a billion times before, and all of a sudden this article jumped out at me called The Golden Rivet. It was uncredited, and this little snippet of the text on page 1 hit me square between the eyes, and it kind of woke me up a little bit. And then I started to page through it, and then I started to go, this has the the possibility in my mind. Now again, I'm half asleep at this point, and perhaps I'm crazy, but I am crazy, but perhaps I'm crazy enough to think Ed Wood is just my girlfriend thinks it. She's like, let me guess, Greg, you found another Ed Wood short story, right? Yeah. Oh, did you find another Ed Wood paperback? Is that what you found today? Like, they're everywhere. But truthfully, I know for sure that was Saving Grace we talked about last week. We talked about some other texts that I think are bona fide Ed. Let's talk about today, the Golden Rivet. So Paul, you want to tell us a little bit about what the Golden Rivet's all about?
Well,
or actually tell us a little bit about yourself first, please. I don't mean to interrupt, but please give us a little background.
Oh boy. Well, I'm a copywriter. I'm in advertising. I've been interested in Ed Wood ever since the early or the mid 90s when the Tim Burton movie came out. It's been my favorite movie ever since. Because of that, I got into Nightmare of Ecstasy, and then I couldn't believe all the how much more that opened everything up and was even more interesting. One of the first things I noticed in Nightmare of Ecstasy is I share a birthday with Ed Wood. So I thought, oh, I must be on the right track here somehow. I mean, the day and month, of course. I'm not as old as Ed Wood would have been if
That way you'd be in astonishingly good condition if you were what, 90,
Yeah.
95 years old now, would it be?
Yeah,
I don't
something
even
like that.
know. I can't count that high.
So yeah, and then from there I just check in every now and then, and sometimes don't think about Ed Wood for a long while, and then other times get all obsessed and look into everything. And the Facebook group that Bob Blackburn has
Yeah.
got me looking at it on a more regular basis, and also the COVID-19 stuff with everything getting shut down and working from home and all that kind of stuff made it a lot easier to follow, go down rabbit holes with Ed Wood and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, for sure.
And plus talking with you, we've been working on some stuff together. So, so the Ed Wood snowball just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
It really does, right? That's how I feel about this particular year. I sort of said I'm going to rededicate myself to some Ed Wood research. Not that I hadn't been doing it pretty strenuously, but I really threw myself into it and thought this time I want to go deep. And I think we've gone deep. The Frank Leahy legend is certainly something I feel really great about. It's seen the light of day, and I think so far we've done a good job breaking that down. We're working on another project. Rob Huffman was here. He's working on that project with us. James Pontilillo is here. I don't think any of these guys will mind me saying that because we've gone down a rabbit hole, and I led these guys down the rabbit hole, so I'm actually doing a mea culpa right now. But that's related to France magazines and books. We'll see what comes of that in about 2023. At the rate it's going, it's turning out to be a pretty tough slog. I think pretty intimidating. On the other hand, the Golden Rivet I don't find intimidating in the sense that it's too impenetrable to try to figure out if it is indeed Ed Wood. So it's about a 3 or 4 page short story sandwiched in the middle of this magazine. Like I said, it's just a bunch of pictures from purportedly films. I don't know what films these are, and I know my exploitation films pretty well. I think they're just photo sets that they wrap the text around. The texts have absolutely nothing to do with the photographs, quite frankly.
Right.
In the opening index, there's a couple interesting things, Paul. I'm sure you noticed it in the opening index. What did you see?
Oh, well, I can't remember.
Well, it's purports to be published by a Swedish company out of Stockholm. So AB Gamla Stand Press, and it says distributed in Canada and the United States. It's got a staff listing of what looks like just everyday type of people, English names that I don't recognize any of them. And I don't know why this magazine needs a staff of 6 or 8 people to cobble together a handful of pictures. And I think let 1 or 2 writers probably just let it rip and make up a story around it. But then as we go deeper into it, there's a page and a half of very painfully unfunny jokes. I don't know if you read the whole issue or not.
I scanned the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay. All right. The jokes, one joke goes on literally for about a page and a half for a minute. You check it out for yourselves. It'll be linked in the description box, as well as at Ed Wood Wednesdays when we post this video tomorrow at Ed Wood Wednesdays. So you get 49, 50 pages in, and all of a sudden, apropos of nothing, it's listed as article, uncredited, the Golden Rivet. So I presume you did some background. It elides what the Golden Rivet really is. You could sort of read into it if you didn't know, and I didn't know. But of course, I've had to find out for myself. So tell us, Paul, what's the Golden Rivet?
Well, so that was the first question I had when by the way, though, real quick, it is apropos of nothing because the entire premise of the magazine is that it's write-ups about these movies, and then right in the middle is the Golden Rivet, which isn't even framed as if it's supposed to be a movie. It's just an article out of nowhere. It's not. There are no photo. Wait. I guess there is a photo illustration, but
there is, but it has nothing to do with the story.
It has nothing to do with it, and the story is not written as if it's a summary of a movie or anything. It's just totally has nothing to do with the rest of the magazine, except it's about sex. So the Golden Rivet, that's the first thing I looked up. I was like, is this a thing or is this made up for this story? So it turns out it is a thing.
Yeah.
In the story, the author lays it out as a way. Basically, you take inexperienced sailors or whatever, or you're on a ship, and you say every ship has a golden rivet. The last rivet put into the ship is golden, and if you can find, it's somewhere on the ship, you should find it, or do you know where it is, or do you want me to show you where it is, or that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Now, in the story, it's explicitly a way to get someone alone and point to it on the floor and get them to bend over so that you can then take advantage of them while
Right.
while
They're all men on the ship, by the way. Again, this is presumably a magazine for straight gentlemen, and this story again pops up in this film magazine for straight gentlemen. So let's just say that.
Yes, and there's not a single photo illustration that does not depict heterosexual situations.
Right.
So I don't know, but in any case, so that's in the story. So the first thing I did is looked it up, and it turns out there's varying definitions. Wikipedia goes into it just saying it's like a hazing thing, like have you ever, what a snipe hunt is?
Yeah.
The experienced guys tell the other guys something that's a fool's errand, or something they'll never find, and then the guy looks for it and looks for it and looks for it, and you laugh at what a dumbass he is for falling for this. So but Urban Dictionary did include the homosexual angle on it, and yet other sources said stuff like you get someone to bend over and then you kick them in the ass, you get someone to bend over and then you pee on them, hence golden.
Right.
But it seems the overarching thing is that it's a trick, a joke you play on someone, claiming to go find something that's not really there, and usually in context of a more experienced person hazing a less experienced person.
Right. The story in the magazine talks about it as if this is on any kind of big ship, on any tramp steamer you may find, words to that effect. But it's quite obvious when you do the research into it, because I think you and I read on the same pages. It sounds like that this was principally on a Navy ship, a military ship. And again, I saw exactly the same thing, hazing ritual, but also the homosexual angle is really interesting, Paul, because I somehow in Googling away on this subject, came across this very long post on a forum from, I think, 2016 or so, by a gentleman who said, I was in the service in the UK in 1960, and there was a steward on the ship named Phil, and everybody said, you need to go talk to Phil. And so I did, and Phil subsequently said, you're a special type of person, so you can call me Phyllis. And then Phyllis ultimately told me that he wanted to show me where the Golden Rivet was on the ship. And the guy said he's using Phil and Phyllis in this real story, presumably real story about his military experience in the UK in 1960. So we've got the male and the female version of the name, and it's the version obviously where Phyllis has a rather untoward take on this encounter. But this gentleman who wrote the post said, I got kind of the heebie-jeebies, and I didn't go down. I took a lot of heat. I'm paraphrasing what he said. I took heat from other guys because I didn't go through with it. I think he mentions a term a couple of times. I'll have to look it up, but it talks about at different points along the ship where you're boarding or going off ship, the ramps go different ways, and there's a quote unquote collision course. But it has, in the way he writes about it in the context of this forum post, the collision course is really a homosexual experience. So but yes, that's clearly what's happening here in this short article, rather, as it's credited to be, the Golden Rivet. So a couple of quick things on that score. It's a mythical thing, right? We need to make sure people understand it doesn't really exist. And from what I read, I guess the Transcontinental Railroad, when they completed building it, they pounded a golden spike in, as at the completion of it. So they're sort of playing off that idea of memorializing the building of some grand piece of technology, the ship. The narrative, I'm trying to think, how do you even it's not really a narrative. It's a first person account by a gentleman who describes himself as quote unquote the radio officer. We don't ever learn who his name is. And he sort of just he just launches right into it. People have knowing smiles on their face when they talk about the Golden Rivet, and then goes right into it. So
yeah,
take it from there, Paul.
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing about it is, and I guess you could point to it as a potential sign that it's the work of Ed Wood, which is that it starts in one direction and then goes an entirely different direction and gets all kind of muddled up and loses track of what's going on, and then just kind of ends. But so it starts off as like a description of this legend of the the urban or the myth of the Golden Rivet and the tradition of the older sailors taking advantage of the younger sailors, and but then it quickly spirals into how I don't even know how to describe it. Like it gets off of the Golden Rivet and goes into, some guys just do the work, and then when they get to go to port, then they can go see, sex workers. And some guys are so great that the sex workers line up on the dock just waiting for them to get off the ship and all this kind of stuff. But other guys aren't so lucky and have to satisfy their urges in some other way. And so then it goes into talking about some of the different people on the ship that will, help you out, I guess. Yeah. Like, I don't know, like there's a cook and there's like
Cora.
The woman
Cora's the cook, right?
Yeah. So Cora, okay. So that's interesting because it's Cora, right?
Right.
And then it goes into some other people, but the other people are clearly men who pass as women because the author goes into the whole male and female name thing.
Right.
So there's Charles and Charlotte, or Charles, who is also Charlotte, and there's Michael, who is also Mildred, and then because the author wasn't paying attention, also Matilda. But exactly. I think that's a mistake.
I think that's what I got.
And then there's Steve, who is actually Stella.
Right.
And the thing is that you have to have, it's not enough just to, want to satisfy these guys. You have to have some other selling points. So like if you can cook real good, you can draw them in. Or if one person has the key to the beer cabinet, so you can draw them in that way.
So it's like if you can be Vince, who only has a male name. So Vince can get whatever he wants strictly on the basis of having broad shoulders and being muscular and being suntanned. There's nothing more important in the aesthetic world here than a man who has broad shoulders, is well muscled, and has especially the suntan. It's mentioned about 6 or 8 times that everybody, whenever a male sort of physical ideal is mentioned and suntanned, it's specified. So Vince can get whatever he wants on the basis of just being a good looking horny guy. But yeah, the rest, depending on, Cora is not able to pass as feminine, so she's resigned to be Cora, strictly Cora, I guess, right?
Yeah, but you'd think it'd be the other way around, but
right. But
I think they say he looks like Captain Bligh from Mutiny on the Bounty.
Yes, not a very pleasant.
Which, if you can
comparison.
Picture, I forget his name, the guy who played the Hunchback, not Lon Chaney, but
Charles Lawton.
Yeah, Charles Lawton played Captain Bligh, and he's a great actor and great director.
I kind of pictured Cora that way, actually.
Not a great looking woman.
I didn't consciously put that together, but right. So, but yeah, given the circumstance, men will do these things, right? And I'm sure it's true, right? I'm sure the truth of the matter is that the Golden Rivet doesn't exist, but this certainly does happen.
I mean, it's not unique to this story in any way.
Right.
I mean, the concept of, sailors and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Men in prison, right? And
yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily identify with being homosexual, but again, as the authors, the radio officer puts it so eloquently here, men are, I don't remember exactly what men are going to do whenever men need to do something, words to that effect.
Yes. And the radio officer telling the story is quick to point out that he knows all this stuff, but doesn't participate in any of it. He knows where the Golden Rivet is, but he's never looked for it or something like that.
He said, I wrote that, I jotted some notes, and this was one that jumped out at me too. I, quote unquote, knew where it was located, and he has located in all capital letters, but did not inspect it closely. So inspect, he uses that word euphemistically. You realize retrospectively when you hear it at the end of the story a couple pages later that the first time he used it, he was using it euphemistically. At that point, you're still being drawn into what is really happening around this Golden Rivet and this scenario. How is it really unfolding? Funny thing, and I want to mention it right here. This story, the subtitle for it, The Saga of Sex at Sea. There's absolutely no sex whatsoever in this story. It's merely implied. There's nothing graphic. I think even the terminology, it's all goofy puns and silly, strained metaphors for sexual aspects of the story. I think the most graphic thing in this story, Paul, is when the word shit is used once. You know? So again, the audience in 1970 picking up this magazine looking for a sex story, I'm not sure what they're actually getting out of it.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, maybe it's just the novelty of anything even slightly dirty or
it could be,
blue or whatever you call it. So yeah, I would say the double names, the Steve Stella, the Michael and Mildred, the Charles and Charlotte, that's points towards someone who either has the same ideas as Ed Wood or is Ed Wood.
Right.
The way the story kind of starts one way and then kind of goes off the rails is also kind of Ed Wood. And then Ed Wood would have experience being at sea. He was not in the Navy, but he was had to be transported over to World War II and was on a boat with a bunch of other guys and probably heard about the Golden Rivet there, I would guess.
I would think, right? That's exactly what I thought. And yeah, the person who, the author of this story certainly is familiar with the terminology, uses, I'm the radio officer, I had to hit the Morse key that calls the bosun, he refers to the bosun, the galley, just things of that nature that, I don't think little details that wouldn't have come up if it wasn't somebody who had served on a ship, So yeah, the names are telling, but like I said, then I stumbled across that thing in the forum where I saw, and they said, call Phil, or Phil said, call me Phyllis. And I thought that's interesting, right? It's kind of interesting. So could there be a subculture that I don't know about? I was going to say we don't know about, but I don't know about, where that is more commonplace sort of understanding. So Glenn or Glenda is not plucked out of the air as Ed Wood's idea, but it's something that's part of, it relates to a subcultural text that maybe the mainstream, for lack of a better term, doesn't really know what it refers to.
It's interesting when Ed gets his own female name, it's Shirley, which has nothing to, unless it's supposed to be funny that it's Shirley Wood. Like, yes, I surely would.
Like a pun. Yeah, that would be right up his alley.
But it's not something like, Ed is not the greatest name to start with in order to try to transform it. But there's like Edwina and things like that. So it's funny, like whenever, this may not even be him, but when he writes about this stuff like Glenn or Glenda or any number of his novels or whatever, it's always kind of a play.
Paula.
Yeah,
exactly. Christine,
yeah, and then when Ed himself in real life takes on his female persona, it's Shirley. So
right,
whatever.
So the author here says that generally there are about 15 guys on the ship. Again, I refer to my notes here, so I'm accurate. 15 guys on the ship or 10 guys on the ship who were primped. Those would be the effeminate guys or feminized guys, presumably. And then there would be 15 broadback males. So he does the math for us and says, given all of that, there's going to be a lot of activity, right? And again, that's about as graphic as it gets. You can imagine what that activity is. There's little clues here that we're talking. I'm just going to say it. We're talking about anal sex. He mentions that if you go down to the Golden Rivet, you're going to come back, quote unquote, sore. I think the only other reference of that sort, and I can't find it in my notes. I know I noted it, but there was another reference clearly to anal sex. Oh, a little loving where it hurt the most, a little loving where it hurt the most. So
yeah,
that's kind of consistent with some stuff we know Ed Wood has written in a lot of ways. So there's some weird language here too, Paul, that's kind of playful, and it does go for strained puns at times and sort of goofy cadences. There are ellipses. There's not a zillion of them, but there's quite a few ellipses at different points along the way. I think some of the language, some of the words that jumped out at me, fanny is a word, and it's a little bit more of an old-fashioned term. In fact, some of the words here, even in 1970, I think seemed a little old-fashioned, especially in a Swedish film magazine, which it's clearly not. But saying things like doll up or referring to bloomers, there's this play on bloom, the bloom of youth and the bloom of the youth's beauty, and the thing that goes into some really interesting stuff, and just some other cool language at different points along the way. I think with plays on words, it's not exactly, stunning. It's not, and you don't expect it to be, but I found it an entertaining story. It does shift gears midpoint. What's the Golden Rivet? Now we're going to kind of get this character study of some of the people on this particular ship. The is it named the SS Limerick, right?
Yeah.
The SS Limerick.
Yep. The SS Limerick. And then speaking of plays on words, there was a couple that were mystifying to me. Presumably they're supposed to be plays on words. I don't know. I
think I know what you're going to say.
I've got 3 of them. At one point, he says, "So our blooming youth put his ace." Oh, I see. Never mind. I just figured it out.
You got it? Go ahead. That's exactly what I knew you were going to bring up.
So our blooming youth put his ace, and then in parentheses, that's ace in all capitals, to work, and cooked up a storm of ham and eggs and French fries and blah, 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 so that Vince would sleep with him. But so I was reading it along and I was thinking ace, like what, like how is that? Because later it says
asset. Does the same thing with the word
she
asset.
had one big asset, parentheses, that's asset, the cabinet key which opened the door to about 100 cases. So that made a little more sense because at least the word ass is in asset.
So, going back to ace, what am I missing? What I thought it was something of that sort, but I don't have it clearly in my head.
Well, I mean, it's a stretch, but all I can think of is the ace is close to ass. I mean,
okay, that's kind of what I thought. Vaguely had that notion in my head, but that's ace is actually, it's used twice in that sentence, right? That's worth mentioning parenthetically. And it's, so you guys know, it's that's with a capital T, and then ace all capitalized, and so, and then the next parenthetical, asset, a big asset. What is it? She had one big asset. That's asset, right? I don't know. Is it supposed to be funny? I guess it is supposed to emphasize some sexual element. The last time it happens, though, so Stella can have her pick. That's pick. That's pick, and pick is all capitalized. That one puzzled me as well.
I don't get that either. The only thing I can think of is that pick is one letter away from prick, which is a penis, but that is a stretch. I mean, this is a dumb way of communicating it. If that's what the joke is, this is a poorly told joke. It's
puzzling, like I said. I had a thought, actually, I was thinking it through. I'm like, could these have been parentheticals? Could it have been sort of a note to the editorial department to capitalize that word? I don't know. I'm like, it made equally as much sense to me as what's happening on the page.
There's that. Or there is the possibility they're just antiquated references that maybe even antiquated for 1970. But it's funny that you mentioned notes to the editor, because I in passing, I thought I saw something else that could have potentially not been intended to be included in print, but now I can't remember what it was.
So look for that, guys, when you read it. Look for anything that might jump out at you from that score. It's not ringing a bell with me, but it's totally, because I couldn't explain that away in any way. Let me see if I noted what you might be referring to, Paul.
Yeah, I might be thinking of something else.
There's some funny stuff I'm coming across in my notes. Some details. The manner in which Mildred is described, I think, is very nice. A spotty-faced little disaster who could swing his fanny better than any Hollywood movie queen. And she could also prove, it's noted by the radio officer, she could prove she was a natural blonde.
Oh yeah,
by showing us, or by the drop of her drawers, she could prove that she's a natural blonde.
yes, and I guess
oh, we forgot Mary Mary, who gets 2 female names, and all she can do is clean and dust. So she's not very well prized because she doesn't really have any goods or services beyond that are important, like having the key to the beer cabinet. So she has to be very loose to be able to get action. And so she's described, this is where inspect comes in again. She'll go down to inspect the Golden Rivet morning, afternoon, and all night. So she's made herself entirely available to overcome her shortcomings because all she can do is cook and clean. I didn't think of it that way until just now, actually reading it back.
Yeah, so, and they make sure to say that the chances are that Mary is not in the least contrary and is quite willing.
right. And it is. That's the language in the story is a little goofy like that. The word goodies ends up getting repeated about 6 or 8 times, and I thought that was kind of interesting that it was repeated so frequently. And of course, it's mostly in a sexual, or not entirely in a sexual context. There's Vince's sexual organs are described as a basket on a couple of occasions. I think the first time with the very glowingly as some kind of I'm paraphrasing again, his wonderful basket, something like that.
He's got a broad back and he's got a wonderful basket.
He's got a broad back. Yep. So that's what we've got. So how do we connect the dots? I think I again was taken from the first time I read it and thinking that this has a feeling to me that it was imbued with a feeling of Ed Wood. And yeah, I think it's not jumping right out at you type of thing. It's not, it's not dripping in his typical fetishes, typical motifs, but possibly to a degree. I think if you read more of the all male fiction he wrote for the Pendulum magazines, you would see elements that he mentions daisy chain here. That was one word the first time I read it that actually jumped out at me. It's not like Ed has cornered the market on usage of the word daisy chain, far from it, but he likes that word, especially in his all male fiction. And there is that sort of guys just, whether they're straight or not, that element plays into a lot of that, a lot of those articles and fiction as well. So something about this, and matter of fact, I'll go as far as to say, I don't know who cobbled this magazine together. It's not, some AB Gamla Strand or Gamla Stan Press. That's the main square in Stockholm. Could some little publisher in 1970 have been operating out of there? Possibly. How would it have gotten in the hands of people who are going to write this text around it that is very referential to current or to the United States? They had to have hired, somebody who's talking about Washington, D.C. and was talking about the Civil War and things like that in reference to the pictures, and sometimes not in reference to the pictures. Like we said, they don't really necessarily even connect up. So this isn't unlike some of the other film magazines that I've seen right from the same era, which purport to be film magazines, but in matter of fact are really just a bunch of photos, and they cobble them together and they call it, in this case, Skin Mag Erotic Cinema Reviews. Maybe it's an imprint where they want to hide, so they put this Swedish publishing address on it, possibly. Maybe, well, I even thought there's an ad in the back for a paperback publisher, and it's out of New York. So I thought some small office in New York that might have just been, I really thought bootlegging other people's material, because the pieces are not even consistent with one another. There's no editorial consistency whatsoever. And this article is just plopped out of nowhere. In fact, my last thought on it, Paul, so I know you want to say something, but I'll lose my thought if I don't get it. The Golden Rivet, I could picture it. I never saw it. I saw probably thus far about 35 of the all-male magazines that Ed mostly wrote, and there's still a handful that I haven't seen, if not more than that. So I could well imagine, I haven't seen it yet, but opening one up and seeing that published exactly looking the same, like they ripped it right out of somebody else's magazine. Because how does it just get plopped in here? I don't really know. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I will conclude by saying that I feel pretty strongly that Ed would pen this. I do.
I was going to say, well, going back to the Swedish thing, I mean, that could just be for like credibility, not credibility, but
Oh yeah, it's more erotic, right?
right, like anything Swedish or French or whatever
Yeah,
is sexy. So slap that on there, and then the guys at
yeah,
the magazine stand might pick yours up instead of someone else's. I don't know.
absolutely.
Um,
Great point.
there's that. I also wanted to point out that even if it's just a string of photographs with words thrown in, so that it's not totally illegal, um, for the most part, the photographs aren't even any good. Um, and I don't mean like I don't mean uh like they're old, so they're not interesting anymore, or the styles have changed, or tastes have changed, or fashion has changed. It's more like it almost looks like nothing was even posed on purpose, or they were caught on the fly, or they just said, hey, do something and we'll take pictures of it and just put it in a magazine. It's not like,
Oh yeah,
hey, get in this position or get in that position, or we're going to light this way or light it that way. And I know like not all pornography is like great art or anything, but usually it's at least like there's certain standard like
right.
angles and stuff. And this just
Exactly.
seems like a couple people like fell out of a chair and they took a picture real quick while they were trying to get up off the ground or something. Like they just look terrible.
It is very shoddy from an aesthetic standpoint. You're absolutely right. And again, the lack of consistency, even a pictorial accompanying the same text will have pictures that are clearly from totally disparate sources.
Mhm.
uh, at times, that it's not strictly Sweden and Denmark, Swedish and Danish models, because at times there's a couple backgrounds where you can see writing that's fully in English, and there's one exterior shot jumps out in my head. I did not. The only person I recognize from the whole issue, there's one picture, and I think it's in the pictorial for the film. What is it called? The Wild. I jotted some of the names down, but I don't think that one. The Wild Wild West Girls or something, right? And it's a picture of a woman sprawled out on a leather couch, and it's Brigitte Meyer, and this is 1970, so she's super young there. I don't know that I've ever. She's ultimately would star in you know Lassie Braun's Penetrations many years later, and that was a huge hit. She's in Tongue, the first blaxploitation porn movie, a movie that's near and dear to my heart. A shout out to the late great Neva Rochelle, who was the responsible party for Tongue. But Brigitte Meyer, I'm like, that's interesting. She's obviously very early on in her career at this point. So where did these photos come from? Some of them do look like there's one where the guy's on a horseback and wearing a cavalry uniform, which is kind of odd, right?
Yeah, but what's interesting, you might notice, there's a couple like that where there might be one small picture at the beginning of the pictorial slash article that it might be somewhat tangentially related. So a guy on a horse in a uniform, or a guy that at least has a cowboy hat on, or a woman in period dress. But you'll notice those ones are never explicit. And then every other picture is just a bunch of 1970s, like, hippies
Right.
that have nothing. So they'll, the little pictures like of the guy on the horse or whatever, it probably has nothing to do with any of the rest of the stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, and they
Right.
don't even try to make it.
No.
They throw one prop in there,
Right. Right.
or
It.
try to write around the pictures. Like I don't think the authors even knew. Sometimes you'll see it and you'll be like, okay, the author tried to pull something together
Yeah.
that has something to do with the pictures. These are like, oh, it's the Wild West, and then you'll see like an electric lamp like on a table, or there's absolutely nothing, no no attempt at all to do anything
Right.
close to a good job at this kind of stuff.
It's and there were film magazines of this sort, actual film magazines that did publish pictures from actual exploitation films, and Ed wrote some of those texts for some of those pictorials, in matter of fact, and for the early Pendulum magazines, it was Golden State News also published. I think they were published under the imprint Classic Publications by editor named Marv Link. Check it out at the Rialto Report. There's a great piece about Marv Link and about the earliest film magazines of this sort, that this was clearly sort of trying to ape, right? And not very, with any fidelity. It was just a money grab. In fact, I kind of wonder, all right, so could they bootleg this story if this is in fact Ed Wood. So let's say plot that hypothetical first and then go from there. If this is in fact Ed Wood, could they bootleg this from some other source? I don't know. How about could they have could this be just a bunch of leftovers and a publisher like Pendulum just like slap it together and we'll call it whatever, right? It's interesting that it's volume 1, number 1. I found no other instances of a magazine with this title at all. So that was pretty commonplace, volume 1, number 1. In fact, last week at Edward Wednesdays, I think I put up an article as well as an editorial from 2 separate, very early Bernie Bloom mags, Burnell Associate magazines before even prior to Pendulum. Put them up, so you can check them out and see if you think they're Ed Wood. If you haven't checked those out, definitely check those out. But in both of those cases, both issues, an issue of a magazine called Tailgate and an issue of a magazine called Fetish and Film, they were both listed as volume 1 or volume 1, number 1. And there's no subsequent issues. So this says actually on the index page, after it lists this Swedish address, Stockholm address, it does say it's a quarterly publication. Perhaps it was intended to be a quarterly publication. Maybe it was, and all subsequent issues disappeared. I have a feeling it was never intended to be a quarterly, but it's to give the imprimatur that this is somehow some kind of legit product where they're actually just going to stitch together a disparate array of sexual material without any care in the world for aesthetics, consistency, the audience itself, what they would have thought or appreciated. Nothing whatsoever. It's just a cash grab, right? My take on it all. Cynical, perhaps, of me.
I actually meant to ask you, I mean, you talked about this a little bit, but I was wondering if there was any context that made you look at this specifically, or if you were just going through, I mean, I guess because it's movie related, but was there anything that was making you look at this specifically, or was it just a random thing?
Totally. Absolutely. I'm glad you asked me that question, so I can touch on that. So it's a collection of magazines posted at the Internet Archive at archive.org, a collection of maybe 15 or 20 magazines that are all film review magazines, and most of them are legit. The magazines I was just referring to, the Marv Link mags, the early Pendulum mags, there's legit Ed work there that he's not credited for in this little collection of magazines posted at Internet Archive, along with skin film erotic cinema reviews. And so I've been back and forth through that whole collection. Certainly a big thank you to the gentleman. I won't name names, but he does list his name there on the postings, and he's I believe a scholar of some note in writing about vintage sexuality and pornography. So I thank him tremendously for putting all that stuff up, for finding those issues, for scanning them, for posting them, and making them available to us. So to answer your question, I've been back and forth through that grouping of magazines many times over with an eye to looking for Ed Wood. And again, some of the Pendulum mags that are in that collection, I think you guys will be able to spot it for yourselves. Go check them out. I'm going to link, obviously, to Internet Archive's page where you can look at the whole issue in context of skin film erotic cinema reviews. And from there, check out all the other stuff from that same poster, and you'll see all these other magazines I'm referring to. So I had more than likely, Paul, gone through this issue on a couple of occasions, quickly scanned it in previous years and quickly dismissed it and say, oh, this is West Coast, promised land with a Pendulum logo on it. Oh, even a GSN logo, West Coast. There's at least potential. I would have probably glanced at this and not glanced twice. So it was a function, I think, of it being very late, me being very tired, and my focus absolutely being elsewhere. And I'm just sort of impulsively at that point paging through the last couple pages, because I might not have looked at the text of an article in this particular magazine otherwise, if I was really thinking more sharply or rationally. So that's a good thing sometimes.
Yeah. Now I wanted to say, I don't want to give away too much, but in James Ponalillo's book about Ed Wood's military service, there is a little bit of speculation that there's a possibility Ed could have been involved in a hazing incident at sea. And I won't go into the reasons why. You'll have to read the book to find out. But but that was on my mind as I was reading. Well, right after I read this and went and read up a little bit more about the Golden Rivet and how it focused on hazing and stuff. And it did make me wonder. I mean, I guess lots of sailors probably had identical experience. I mean, one person's experience in a broad sense is probably very similar to another person's experience. And so there's no shortage of men who were in the service and got out of the service and wrote dirty stuff for magazines. You know what I mean?
Right.
But however, if you're looking for stuff, there's, like I said before, the double names, there's being at sea in general, which he would have had experience at. There's the potential of having experience with hazing rituals at sea there. And then, of course, we know he wrote for dirty magazines and, dirty, whatever, sex magazines. And we know that his writing could be meandering and crazy. So, and try to be funny and have puns and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, there is some stuff there. And sometimes you just get the feeling, like if you read enough, you'll get the feeling, you know what I mean? So I'm glad I read it and it's fun to talk about. It was not one where I got that feeling necessarily, but it might be a function of I didn't find it myself. so
that's why I'm glad you wanted to talk it through, because again, I want to hear a different opinion, because I do think sometimes maybe I'm biased towards that feeling, and that's really what it is. You get a feeling, and it's very mysterious sort of thing. We could talk about tangibles all day long, right? And say, there are ellipses, there's a feminized and male name next to it, and this, that, and the other thing, and it all seems to line up. But at the end of the day, let's state facts here, folks. We will never know. There's no document on planet Earth that has Ed Wood's name on a copy of the story of the Golden Rivet. If I'm wrong, then go back to clipping off my pink. I don't expect that to happen. So we're never really gonna know. So it's a speculation. Again, I'm glad actually, because I feel sometimes I make these speculations, I don't get a lot of feedback or anybody necessarily openly telling me otherwise. So, and I appreciate your viewpoint immensely. So I'm glad to hear it, that you feel your feelings a little different than mine.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a thing where I'm like, you're crazy. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
It'd be
So
all right
don't
if it
take
was.
it that way.
It would be okay.
It's
if
not.
It was.
I mean, it seems interesting. I've had things where it jumps out at me, and I'm like, oh yeah, this has to be Ed Wood, and I'll mention it, and someone will go like, oh no, we know who did that. It was so and so. It's documented, so on and so forth.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay, never mind.
That's I know. I've thought things were Ed Wood, pretty strongly, and subsequently found out, that's somebody else entirely. So them's the risks, right? Them's the risk. If you want to go down this road and you want to, it's kind of antithetical. I guess we've both sort of given our conclusions at this point. So let's try to wrap a bow on this a little bit. This is antithetical to what I set out to do in the first place about 6 years ago, almost to the day. So we're at about roughly the 6-year anniversary that I've been putting up articles at Ed Wood Wednesdays for the most part, pretty regularly. Joe Blevins often as well, the founder of the blog. And in the last year, this is, I think, podcast number 21. So have built this channel out. This is going to be the shortest one we've ever done, Paul, if we really do wrap this up here.
Well, I think that's a good thing. I think sometimes it's fun to go on forever, and sometimes it's good to have a shorter one.
I'm not sure how to take that. I'm joking. Actually, I know from I joke about it myself. Again, I don't expect very few and far in between the people out there who are going to want to spend this much time delving into such minutia. So it's apropos to your point to spend even an hour on a mere 3.5 pages of literature of this sort is already quite a lot. It's more than anybody would have expected. A
short episode on a short story makes sense.
It does.
And plus, maybe the episode will be like roughly the length of Glenn or Glenda or something.
It might turn out to be almost exactly that. We're close on the time frame. It looks like
depending
we're really close
on which version.
Yeah, exactly. So but I find it interesting that over the course of the last 6 years, I went in a direction where I ultimately started to do what I set out to debunk, which I was like, people are making all these speculations and surmises, and no, it can't be, no, it can't be, no, it can't be. Now I find myself still desirous of not getting it wrong, obviously, but now looking at it like, can it be? Looking at it from a wholly different perspective, which has really been interesting. And every now and then a genuine discovery, I think, does come along, and that makes it all worthwhile. And it's fun to boot. And certainly it's fun to talk to my friends in Ed Woodology, including Paul, and I'm grateful that you came here again to join me at the Ed Wood Summit podcast. We're gonna we'll be back. We do have more up our sleeve in relation to Ed Wood, a couple different projects brewing. So give us a little time, and more to come on that score. And I'm sure other items may come up in the interim. I'll certainly be back here at the Ed Wood Summit podcast shortly, and look for it linked obviously at Ed Wood Wednesdays at Joe Blevins's incredible Dead to Rights blog. So much more pop culture content on there than just Ed Wood. It's absolutely staggering. I don't think I personally I surf the site often. I don't think I've personally even begun to scratch the surface of the amazing amount of work that Joe's done. Again, not strictly about Ed Wood, but just the pop culture at large. Also doing now, These Days Are Ours. If you're a Happy Days fan, it's a superb podcast. He's partnered with someone on that, and that goes up every Tuesday. One of his Happy Days apropos, if you remember, Happy Days was on at 8 p.m. on Tuesdays. I remember that. I think that's probably why he puts it up. I don't know if he does it right at 8 p.m. I never really thought about that until now, but I certainly watched Happy Days when I was a kid. And if you read adult paperbacks, go over to Triple X Books, tell them the podcast sent you. If you don't read adult paperbacks, go over to Triple X Books and buy a bunch and start reading them. It's a lot of fun. Anything you want to say in closing, Paul?
No, that's about it. I was going to say it might be interesting to do an episode where you or whoever else, if there's like a short list of popularly misconceived Ed Wood works that we know for a fact he did not do, just as an episode topic to debunk some of these claims that get thrown around. It'd be nice to have one of those, and then part of the fun of being into a guy who has never had mainstream success and was on the fringe and all that is that you can look for all these gems and hidden things and have all kinds of theories and stuff in a way you couldn't do with, like Steven Spielberg or someone like that,
Right.
So,
right. It would all be documented, right?
Yeah.
And the sheer amount of material that's very unique to Ed as well. Very few people probably ever wrote as much as he did, whether you think that it has any literary value or not. It's hard to contest his how prolific he was.
It's funny. I was just reading an article the other day that had a passing reference, like Ed would turn out the occasional novel, and it's like
occasional.
No, he wrote like 100. How many? Hundreds of novels.
I don't even know. I mean, we know of maybe 50 or 60 that have been, more definitively attributed. I think in one instance, he himself said something more like 140. I think I've heard 160. I wouldn't doubt 200 plus. I wouldn't doubt it for a second. And that's in addition to the magazine work, which if you've ever seen the resume with his pendulum listings just from, I think, 1971 through 74 or so, if you've ever seen that item alone, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of short stories and articles and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictorial texts that are of substantial length, enough material to so far have filled 2 volumes of short stories recently. And you should go check out both of those. Blood splatters quickly, and oh God, you know the name of the I'm embarrassed. Angora Fever. I'm embarrassed not to know. And then When the Topic is Sex, or when the topic is sex, is the 3rd volume. This time it's going to be articles from the Pendulum magazines, and that's thanks to Paul mentioned him earlier. Bob Blackburn, co-heir of the Kathy Wood estate, has put those out, and there's just still so much more material out there to even possibly wrap your mind around. That's separate and apart from all the film scripts, separate and apart from other things we don't even know that he did. I of course have spent an inordinate amount of time documenting what I think is his work in loops, not only writing box cover summaries, but also writing the subtitles, which again, seems like it wouldn't be a lot of substantial work, but when you add that on to all the other things that he was doing, and separate and apart from, we get it wrong sometimes, the guy was a workhorse, no doubt about it.
And that's, churning out that, if you ever want to know how hard it is to write a novel, even a terrible novel, next month is National Novel Writing Month, and the goal is to write 50,000 words in 30 days, November. So if you are thinking in your head, who cares? Anyone can write a terrible book. Well, give it a shot. I hope, it's still a lot of work, even if it's quote unquote not any good. So imagine doing that, 50 times.
Absolutely. Are you going to give it a crack? Are you going to give?
I've done it before. I don't know if I'm going to do it this year, but
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of taking some works that we know aren't Ed, that are have been attributed to him mistakenly, and debunking them, go down a list. And so yeah, your idea. Let's do it. You tell me when. You tell me what you want to talk about. If I come across some stuff, I'll float it by you.
well, I'd be relying on you because I don't really have a list.
Well, I'll stumble upon a few things and I'll float them your way, and we'll get back on here and we'll break it all down. Break it all down for all you folks who are patient enough to sit through our podcast here, my podcast at the Edwood Summit Podcast. Again, I appreciate it more than you guys know. Final words, Paul?
That was it. I guess I've
Awesome.
already made us go too long anyway. We're going to miss that hour.
No, I think we're pretty much close to being on the button. So
Oh, good.
we'll call it a day, and see you back here soon. Thank you, everybody. I hope you had some fun watching this. I hope you got a few laughs out of it. Hope you found some benefit in it. And if you're an Ed Wood fan, I hope you really do appreciate what I'm aspiring to do here over time. Thanks. We hope to see you soon.